Meeting to order. Can we get roll call attendance, please?
Weinbrenner,
Here.
Wendell,
Here.
Ryan,
Here.
Costola, Cole. Here. Kyer,
Here.
Brandon.
Here. We have a quorum. Tim, would you read the purpose statement, please?
Yes. The purpose of these budget study work sessions is to collaboratively review, analyze, and discuss the proposed budget allocations for the upcoming fiscal year. We aim to ensure financial transparency, engage community stakeholders, and align our financial resources with the village's strategic priorities and community needs. Through these sessions, we seek to foster informed decision-making, promote fiscal responsibility, and identify areas for potential improvement and efficiency within our budgetary framework. No items will be voted on during these sessions. The 24-25 financial activity presented during these sessions were current as of 31 March 2025. Any course of action discussed during these sessions are only for consideration, will only be adopted when voted on during a regular meeting or during budget adoption.
Thank you. Members of the public can address council once recognized by the chair. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Prior to addressing council, please state your name and address. That's a negative. We have no public comment. Budget walkthrough. Tim, I hand it over to you.
All right. So, where we left off last time, we were in our general fund 101, and we had just finished EDA, and we took a break from 101. We finished police, we finished fire, and now we are moving on to I'm actually on the wrong agenda. Can I see your agenda there? Yeah. I was like, why is this not up here? All right, we got community development, and I'll pull that up on the big screen. Sorry, I'm still trying to get it up over here. Ah, here. General funds. Community development. All right, right here. And let me switch over on the camera so people at home can see this too. So so everyone also knows, I have now the last budget work session is now online, and this one is live streaming.
Okay.
So everyone knows.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So, Lisa, did you want to talk anything about community development on these ones?
So this community development is for like the commissions. These are the expenditures that with the commission, so planning commission and like anything that we do like CDBG is under here. That's the community development block grant. And for their expenses.
Would you mind talking a little bit about the CBGG grant fund? I know we had talked previously about doing the sidewalks with that, and then there were some issues with sidewalks. So are there a lot of limitations on it, or what happens with that?
So right now, how it is with the community development block grant, it goes to the Oakland County and it's funded by HUD. And what it is that, so you have to apply each year. Well, there's 2019, 20, 21 monies that we must expend. You should expend them every year. However, Oakland County now is looking at it because HUD is saying if you don't utilize these monies, they're going to be taking them back. So what we have to do right now is because we
something we still can use, it's not gonna be expired.
Yeah, so, and that's, Lisa and I have been talking to Oakland County, who run this for us. You're supposed to maintain a 1.5 ratio between the total funds and how much you would get any given year. And again, they haven't spent it since, they've spent some, but we still have unspent monies from 2019. And so rather than just give it back or anything like
Yeah.
that, we've looked at ways in which we can utilize it in a manner that we can actually spend it and not have to sit on it. And one of the problems is that when we are using those funds, they have all kinds of requirements that we have to follow as far as prevailing wages, and a project that would normally cost $40,000, for example, would cost us $80,000 because of that. And so it kind of doubles expenses. So instead of having to be locked into doing that, our recommendation and what we're gonna bring forward at a public meeting in May is that we're gonna ask to get it reprogrammed to code enforcement. And so where code enforcement, we can just use it there. We have a way that we can track it. We can track it to being supporting the low to moderate density areas. And that allows us to, hopefully, when we get to the, and ideally, as we go forward, like that's just how we will use CDBG funds that can offset that cost. And any of the money that we would have used for sidewalks or something like that, that we can now reprogram and be able to do the project without having to follow all the CDBG guidelines. But again, at this point, with our budget,
Right.
we don't have much for capital improvements as it is anyway, so that would just offset the cost of the code enforcement that we have.
Now, I guess the last question is that, you said we have to repurpose it, so does that mean council has to authorize what CDBG funds are used for then?
Yes, and so when we put in applications for CDBG, council approves it. When we reprogram it, we have to do there's a whole process that we have to
Okay.
follow.
Thank you.
Under CDBG expenses, that's the only real increase here. Everything else has stayed approximately the same over the last couple of years. What's that 68,000 to support?
So it's actually, that's already money that's the money that's been provided to us, the revenues that have been
That is the
provided
grant?
from CDBG for these periods that we plan to expend. And there's some of the specific projects in that we've already got, like we said, code enforcement's one of those. We have 17,900 for tree planting, that, we're gonna, it has to be used in the low to moderate income areas, which we have a map for. We have new pavilion, or new tables and benches for Lakeside Park that meet ADA requirements. And there might be a couple other items. Brian, did you have someone say that looked like you wanted to talk?
No, when you brought it up, because with the CBDG, there's federal grant funds, there's a lot of limitations, prevailing wage, Bacon Davis Act, those kind of things. We did the sidewalk project on Great Charles was part of that, and the contractor said, I think the project was like $125,000. He said if we would've just done it as a village, it probably would've been around $80,000.
Yeah.
So because you had to pay prevailing wages, and there was a lot of paperwork involved. Every time you do payroll, you have to turn in reports and stuff like that, so there was a lot of overhead that they had to cover. And Tim had mentioned, we've used it in the past for code enforcement, we've bought park equipment with it before.
Neighbor to neighbor, it goes into some of those.
Yeah, the big pavilion at Lakeside, some funds were used to build that, but because we used DPW labor, we didn't have to, we were already using, government workers, so we didn't have to, the Bacon Davis Act really didn't apply to us, but we use an outside contractor.
Since we intend to spend the $68,000, are we not expecting contractual fees?
So, as far as,
Like, is that contract work? Is that what contractual means?
It'll all be covered under that expense, because it'll all go through there, it'll all come out of that one line. We won't
Out of
have
the
to separate.
68,000?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
If you see in the revenue, there was a CDBG in, so it's kind of an in and out, because we haven't gotten the monies yet. We have to spend the money, and then we have to turn in paperwork to get reimbursed.
Okay,
So I think we just had to, it's kind of like an in and out.
okay.
So that's why it's as a requested budget instead of like, we already have the money, but now we're asking for it, but we're gonna get it back, but.
it's really just to track that we were both receiving it and that we're expending it as well. Yep. Any questions on community development? Now we'll move on to public works. Brian?
Public Works is, all the other things we do at DPW outside of local streets, water, sewer, that kind of stuff. So, associated union costs like uniforms, cold weather allowances, drug testing for the CDLs, that kind of stuff all comes out of here. And there's no major changes in this, so if there's any questions, I can answer those.
I have one, which is, retirement in 23-24 was 312,000, and now it's only 5,600. I mean, that's a great thing, but what happened?
That
So
would-
that retirement, and Lisa might be able to speak on this, so that was probably during, it's definitely part of our unfunded pension liability.
Oh, that may be when the grant money came through that we got from the state that brought us up to that 60% threshold. So they probably expended it out of there, so we had to go back and make sure that,
Well, I actually, so that money that we got the grant, the $2 million or whatever, that actually is like, stays frozen at MERS, and so it doesn't affect how much we actually pay out. It's kind of that money, and then also I think like the 450,000 that we've paid into it as well additionally, that stays on, it doesn't affect our payments, how much we pay.
no, but we'd have to show that, I'm just saying
Oh, okay.
that just shows that it passed through.
Okay.
It had passed through an account.
What this is, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you had a couple people retire, so they're no longer in the DB, now they're in the DC, which is a huge difference in the retirement calculations when we take them out of their payroll.
Thank you.
Yeah, one person would have been, one, because the other person would have came out of water, so.
Two things, Brian.
Okay?
One thing is, we've got uniforms for 3,500, and then we got uniform allowances for 15. Is that like what we allow?
One's a contractual thing, they get a set amount every October for cold weather gear.
Okay,
And then also in the contract, we're obligated to supply daily uniforms for them, so we supply 5 pairs of pants and or shorts.
Standard
Yeah,
uniforms.
standard uniforms, yeah. So one is a contractual thing for cold weather gear, which would be boots, boot allowance per se, and then the other one is the everyday gear that the village.
So one thing is things we provide, and another is the money that we provide them in
To
order
buy,
to.
to buy their cold weather gear.
and the other thing is, I notice every department has a vehicle fuel fund.
Yes.
Why can't the village put in their own tanks? I mean, is there a lot of logistics?
We've looked at it,
Behind
we
that?
have diesel at the DPW for the bigger trucks. Chief Watson, Chief Narsh, and myself met with several different vendors, and the way we're going right now, we get gas cards and we use them at Lingelmeyer's, or we can use them anywhere, but the card company discounts the tax off of it, so what we're paying is not the same as what's at the pump.
Okay,
So
all right.
we're getting that tax discount because we're taxed.
Basically, we're paying what we would pay if it came
If
to
it
the...
came to us, yes.
Okay, all right, that's what I was curious about.
Hey, Brian, on the training, in 24, 25, you show 4,800, then 25, 26, you're only showing 2,500.
We had a couple guys that had to get CDLs, so it came out of there. So
Okay.
now everybody has CDLs, so we won't have that expense this
They
year.
got them now?
Yeah,
Okay, good.
Are they running Bs or As?
Bs. That's all that's required, Bs with an air brake endorsement.
We don't have nothing that requires A.
No, but we have a couple drivers that do have As that have it already, so.
And when our staff gets certified on a CDL and we provide a CDL, do we have any stipulations that say they must work with us for so long if we're providing the training or anything?
We started to go that route, and because at the time we were having a hard time, but it's always something we're going into contract negotiations we can look at.
When you say hard time, you mean hanging on to staff?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, hanging on to staff and just getting qualified, people were applying without CDL, so we had to do something, we can hire you, we can train you, and, we did talk about it originally, like 2 years in payback, but there were some legal things that were brought up, so we.
Yeah, we'd have to look at the legal considerations, because similarly, the similar discussion we had with police training and keeping them on, I know I would have to bring in Mike on that conversation and see what the requirements are, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if people are coming to their CDL license here in the
And
next
just
month,
bounce
just
it.
bounce it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah,
Hey, Brian,
yes.
is there, on the CDL, did they come out with, Michigan come out with a new law reference if you have a stick
Yeah,
control and
there's
then a
interstate.
automatic, because there are two different,
Yeah, there's interstate and intrastate, so one you
Okay.
can cross state lines, one you can't. Then the other regulation is if you take the test with a manual transmission, you can
did
And
change.
the fees have
it.
gone up exponentially for the
Yeah,
CDLs
they've
as
added,
well.
as a B, you need 12 hours of training, classroom training, plus a road test. And with an A, you need 36 hours of classroom training and a road test. So the cost has gone up. Yeah, that's why there's a shortage of CDL drivers, because before you just go and take a test, take your road test,
Right.
and you were good. Now they're, classroom time,
If I'm not mistaken, they changed the weight limits on the Class Bs too.
that I'm not sure of. I know it used to be anything over 10,000 pounds or if it had air brakes, so,
Yeah, I mean, you can, the Class B, I think you can only go up to a certain amount of weight now.
yeah.
I would like to apologize. I did not offer you a public comment, young man. Amber was hiding you from my view right here. Her hair
What are
did
you trying to
was in my way.
say, like,
So. If you would like a public comment, I'd like to give you that opportunity now.
he's like, no.
Okay.
He says, I'm
We're
on
here
my
for your
phone.
Boy Scout stuff, right?
Troop 43?
192.
Oh, awesome. Very cool.
Any other questions on DPW?
All right. Now we will go on to our non-departmental. Lisa?
So for non-departmental, these are kind of the costs that don't fit like in any department. So for example, like, you know, again, if we were going to have, so like retiree healthcare, that used to be put into this, this particular line items, but now I'm breaking it up between the departments so we can see how much we spend in each department. Or like if there's memberships that might, you know, fit, like maybe that isn't, you know, in clerk, or it's not in the village manager. So these are those things that just don't fit in a specific department, so it's kind of like a catch-all.
Okay. So this insurance, is this building insurance then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. You preemptively answered my questions.
Where is Haya gonna go? Cause I see there's nothing for them.
So, I spoke with Haya, and they said that they didn't, like, they told us, so CDBG monies, they didn't ask for any this year from Haya, and then so Haya, there was gonna be nothing to give to Haya. We can't give to Haya as a, you know, as a municipality, it has to be a pass-through. But there is no CDBG money, so there was nothing given, so that's why there's a zero this year.
Okay.
All right, any other questions on non-departmental? All right, well, that completes our general fund, our 101. So we will now move on to our first fund, well, we the DDA, our first fund outside of that. All right, which is going to be lake improvement, so 220. And let me pull that one up.
I do just have one clarification.
Yeah.
So we are on this budget as of March in the red for $763,000 basically.
Yeah, so that's, like I said, and we're in the deficit just of our spending. And Lisa, do you want to talk about that portion right now? I mean, we were, as I talked about at the very beginning, we've been in a deficit for years,
Right.
how they've been operating, and it just has escalated because as expenses grow, it was 450,000, 660,000, you know, and it just, because we keep being obligated to do this. And as you look through the general fund, I mean, it's not like we have big projects or anything, it's just day-to-day operations that we are obligated to provide as a community right now, like per our charter, per our statute, we provide police, we provide fire, all of these things. And nothing is big on that we have. And so really it comes down to, you know, a revenue issue. Again, we haven't changed our revenue, how we're doing revenue in some things in 40 years, something, you know, our fees haven't changed in 10, 15 years. And so, which is, you know, reflective on where we sit right now.
So the two things that, because again, if you're looking at the activity from 23, 24, and maybe matching it to the proposed for the 763,000,
So on the lake improvement fund, we're going, was there any, I think we're gonna have a lot of discussions on that, on our deficit and like how we move forward on correcting that, and that will go into our course of actions that we're gonna discuss as we get through the budget walkthrough. But yeah, that's the big concern that we all have, is, that's just kind of what we're left with, and how do we move forward and correct that. For lake improvement, so how this fund is traditionally set up is that 5,600 is that our special assessment that we do for a special assessment. In order to get the funds back, we pay into it a little bit because we're property owners for the aquaweed treatment that we just voted on recently. However, you see that there are some additional expenses that were on there. That was, Brian, you want to talk specifically what those were for?
I
That
just-
was-
I'm sorry, I can go and take that. So I did some journal entries because
Okay.
there was limestone and some row invoices that were not supposed to come out of this account, so these have been fixed.
Okay, so it actually shows this is actually balanced out of the 5,600 now. However, where did those extra funds go into? Because those would be reflected, are those in DPW lines now, or in the,
Those came out of that fund balance, that was for the dam.
okay.
That was,
Okay.
there was a.
The dam
was a-
improvement.
Yeah,
Yeah,
dam improvement.
so there's a dam improvement fund that for all, like, there was like 140,000, I believe, and that those came out of. Now, when we're talking about the mill pond and the dam, just be full transparency and, like, this next year, we're gonna have some big decisions to make on that. Because we just got back our report from, our team that was supporting Rowe on our dam. And essentially, there's gonna have, because of the way that the dam is, Eagle is gonna require us to do a drawdown pretty soon and either repair or replace the dam. And so we're right now looking at options. We're having a meeting on Tuesday to discuss it. But that could be, for a repair, $2 to $3 million. A replacement, or removal, there'd be other consequences of that. We wouldn't have a pond at that point. And so we're gonna provide more information on that. It'll be at your next meeting. I just wanted to let everyone know I'll provide it, that study that was presented. And hopefully we'll have some more options about that, whether or not we can work with the County Water Resource Commissioner to do that. I believe we're gonna have to reinstitute the Mill Pond Community Group that had existed previously to discuss this, to provide council some recommendations on how to move forward.
So the Mill Pond Community Group, what does that consist of? It's just members of the community?
It was a community group and advisory group that would come in and basically, we could have Rowe talk to them, because there's people that are very passionate about it, but it's also, as we discussed at our last, when we were doing our special assessment, that, what is the general community benefit of it, besides for aesthetically? And so,
And what happened after the Sanford Dam failed up there, it's similar to the Flint water crisis. There's a lot of attention being paid to these dams, and they're changing the way they rate them. And ours is a high significant or high hazard dam, and they're changing the rules and regulations for those and what's required by the owner of them. And because the village owns the property that the dam's on, we're considered the owner, so everything goes through us. So we've worked with Rowe in the past. They hired SME they came out probably 30 years ago and did a recommendation, and because of the cost involved, they started the dam fund, and it's just, got to this point now where some hard decisions are gonna have to be made.
if we were to take, again, it's one of those things, if we would have taken care of this in 2012 when it was first recommended, it would have cost us probably $1 million. And now we're 3 times that because of just kicking the can down the road.
Which, is it the dam that's like right at,
It's the earthen dam, so it's the one, if you,
Where the-
Southern Dam, there's 2 dams on the.
I was saying, there's one that has like
Metal.
the metal thing that lifts up, let the water
Well,
out.
they
and then
both have
there's-
gates on them, but the Southern Dam is the concrete structure.
Okay,
And
that
the
one
other
that's
dam
behind the house,
The other
basically.
dam is across where the old waterworks building was, so.
but both of them are part of the consideration of it too.
They're both in need of major repairs.
I mean, if you go to the one that's not really, not the earthen dam, you can, if you go, you can just see where it's rusted through and water's just
Looks like
going
Swiss
through it,
cheese.
yeah.
Well, I know that the last major storm we had, when everything was, water was just pouring over that thing
Yeah.
nonstop, the whole 9 yards. I'm surprised it stayed. I'm glad it stayed.
So,
It's taken a beating the last couple of years. Right after we did the work on the earthen dam, we had what they call 2 500-year back-to-back storms.
Oh, I
This
know.
year, we had that 1,000-year storm, so, I mean, and that's Eagle's concern, is that earthen dam is gonna fail, and they're gonna have issues similar to Sanford, which we won't have the amount of damage or anything there, but it'll definitely, we don't wanna make the news either, so.
so, and we've had some conversations and discussions about potential course of action. I don't know the reality or like what is feasible as far as petitioning the Water Commission to take it over and all these other things, to lessen our financial responsibility and what that actually entails. That's why I think it would be important to bring a community group in to actually, look at some of those options. People that are invested, I know, I'm sure they're watching Jim Clark and Cheryl Everly, who live there, very passionate about it. They would want to be part of this discussion, and I think it would, because they are some big stakeholders and some other members of that group, it would be beneficial to bring them in, talk to the experts, and that way we can have not only the experts but also the community come back and give us their opinion on a way forward on this. Because the other part of that will be whether or not they want to accept a special assessment, just specifically for the people that are there in order to rebuild it, which would be, a huge financial burden for them, but also it shouldn't be on the rest of the community that might not benefit from it. So that's discussions we're gonna have to have. Again, we have a meeting on Tuesday, Lisa, Brian, and I, with Roe to kind of go over the studies, talk about course of action, look at some precedents and some case studies in order to provide more information. I'll have probably what comes out of that meeting at your May 13th meeting to discuss, and I'll also provide in your report that study. So, but again, that isn't reflected on here, and none of that's been talked about because we don't know the reality of that situation. I just want to have full transparency about where we sit. Again, these things are just piling up on us of past.
Now, Mr. Wendell brought up the point of water going over the dam. And I think it was Ms. Everly actually mentioned that one of the residents that lives right next to it was out there lifting boards up.
Adam, yeah.
Adam, so is there something we need to budget for to have a water monitoring system so we're not having water over the top of the dam?
Well, we haven't seen, they took the Davisburg Dam out. There's still 2 more smaller dams upstream, but with that Davisburg Dam being gone, we're getting that water quicker. So for us, this is probably the first year, and then with, like I said, there was a 1,000-year storm, trying to regulate that. We do have some markers out there, and we try to maintain it at a certain level. And Adam has done a great job monitoring for us, so we don't have to keep sending staff down there all the time. And he'll call if he needs something. That day, what happened too was there was a lot of debris that had built up around the spillway or the entryway there, so it was so we were able to get that cleaned out, and that helped alleviate some of the problem.
I would just hate for Adam to get sick or something like that.
Well, no, yeah.
Well, it's not Adam's primary responsibility. He has just taken on himself because he lives there, he sees it,
Yeah.
and he's worked with the team. I mean, it's really on our DPW to do that. Danny and Brian have been out there like monitoring it and
It
taking care
would
of
be
it.
beneficial to have a water monitoring system out there, like they have on Shiawassee. They tell it remotely ping in, you can get
Yeah,
the
but
water level.
Yeah, but we don't have the capability to remotely lift or lower the
It's
gauge. So
a
that-
very manual system,
And
yeah.
that would be something if we were to want to replace it, then
Yeah,
we
okay.
can look at it that way too, so.
So I was I went to, I was in Detroit a couple weeks ago, and I was looking at funding resources for water needs and things. And one of the things they talked about with that is that these things that we call 100-year storms, they're now like 10-year storms, like because of just everything that's going on. So the water levels that we see in those, it's just going to continue to grow. I mean, that's at least the analysis that they have, so.
Now, with that being Mill Pond, part of Rose Township, does Rose Township have any stake in any of this stuff?
So those are questions that we've discussed, and that we are gonna have to go forward. And that's why when we have those discussions about, is this something that is more fitting for the County Drain Commission to take over, or the Water Resource, because it is a split between multiple municipalities within the county. And I know that there's pros and cons, and we'll discuss that probably like after we have more conversations. Again, my understanding of this is pretty limited. I've not had this situation. But, you know, yes, if we give it away, it limits some of our financial responsibility. We're still gonna have some because we are still owners. So if they special assess us, we would have to pay into that based on our square footage and such. But it would limit it, it would also limit our like responsibility, just to replace and take care of it. But also, it.
Would it limit our liability?
Yes, it would limit our liability some, as well. But yeah, but the other portion of that is that it also limits our control of it. Like if they decide they want to get rid of it, and then we don't have a pond, it just becomes like a marsh or a
Black River at that point.
White River, yeah. So, those choices would be out of our hands at that point if we decide to go that route. But again, this is not fully thought out, vetted, and I just want to, again, be 100% transparent that these discussions are happening right now, so. All right. And so, again, nothing's reflected, we're going to approve that on that. So the next item is we're moving into our solid waste fund.
This is our garbage. This is, and so what it is, it's the money that we get in from the taxes, because there's a special assessment on everybody's tax, which I will be bringing to the board, because we have a contract with Priority Waste, and they have it tiered every year, their prices go up, and it's per unit. So I will be bringing to the board to get that approved, because we're gonna be doing taxes here around July 1st, and we need to, again, we don't wanna be losing money, because right now, I believe it's $240 on the taxes, but we'll be paying more than that to Priority. So we'll have to raise the special assessment on the taxes for the garbage. It's not gonna be much, it's only maybe gonna be like $15, I think we figured, something like that, about $15 per month.
Per month.
Per year, I'm
Per
sorry,
year, I'm
taxes.
Yeah.
Per year on the taxes, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Thank you.
All right. No questions about solid waste?
Well, how long is our contract with Priority right now?
That's a good question.
3 years, I thought it was.
I thought it was 4 or 5,
I think
4 or
it's,
5,
yeah,
yeah.
4 or 5 years.
No,
I
because-
think it's 4, I thought it was 4.
I mean, I know that Facebook is a good place to get any information, but I always see comments on there about people, "Oh, my trash wasn't picked up, my trash wasn't picked up."
And all the trucks are equipped with cameras, so if they call into the village offices and complain, the sooner they do it, the better, because I think they keep the video for 7 days. So if they call in the day and say, hey, my trash wasn't picked up, they can go back and look and say, well, we were by there at 8:05 and there was no camera. Or, yes, we didn't necessarily make an attempt to do it, but all their trucks have cameras on, so they have the ability to go back and look at it to see if something was there or wasn't there, so.
Our contract is through June 30th of 2020.
Yeah, I was just pulling it up. So.
We got it last year, so.
So one question for this. The request for service that we put out stipulates what we were looking for, is my understanding. So how it works is we put this is what we want, this is what we're gonna get. But how come some of those things aren't actually in the contracts? So for instance, one of the items it's sticking in my mind, if a customer calls and makes a complaint to the waste service provider, they're supposed to provide us with a monthly report of the complaints. But that's not actually in the contract.
And I can't speak to contracts that were done.
Well, but is it normal that a contract should include what's in the request for services?
Yes, it should really specify exactly what our expectations are from whoever we.
Because I think the request for service was very detailed,
Yeah.
but the contract missing a bunch of details. Not normal.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're not directly calling the Priority, they're calling the staff here, and the staff are.
Well, in the request for service, there was something in there that says if customers make a complaint, Priority must contact the village. And that's not in the contract. So I was just curious about if it was normal to not have that parity.
And
Yeah.
I think some of the issue is the original, I'll say
Because we're a
I
couple,
think a lot of the things that we were told and promised were through him, and then when he left, they may have gotten,
like, one of the things, you're not supposed to have trucks older than 5 years. Now, whether or not they're using trucks older than 5 years, I know some of them are pretty old.
well, one of the other concerns is priority, and they're working on improving their fleet, is they don't have the arms like Republic had, so they're using a two-man crew and lifting them off the back of the truck.
But I think this next year they're supposed to have.
They've told us that they're in the process of purchasing them, but it's like our large equipment, like our snow removal and stuff like that. Those trucks are specialty items, so it takes a while for them to be built out and then get them, so a lot of times they've ordered them and paid for them, they're just waiting on the vendor to provide them.
But to answer your question, yeah, so when we request for service like that, we're supposed to make sure all of that language is in there, like as an administration, we want to make sure that it represents it, and then as a council, when it's presented to council for vote, to make sure all the things that are important to council that were in there is in there before we approve the contract as well. So, but again, I can't really speak on this one.
Because I don't recall there being, I wasn't on council at the time, but I don't recall there being a contract presented to council at the time. I think it was just the request for service that was listed. I could be mistaken, but,
Yeah, I'm not sure.
okay.
Maybe I missed the conversation here a little bit, but why did we, pick another company to come in?
Contract with
What was
those-
the difference in
I
cost?
think it was almost $50,000 a year.
It was $5 a house, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so it was substantial enough that, that council, they were definitely the low bidder, and when compare apples to apples at the time, it was like, the village can save about $50,000 a year, so.
But there was some differences too, that we now have 2-day service, where before we just had 1-day service.
Well, we had the option, and when we did that, we
Yeah,
had
we
the
did have
option
the
to go
option.
with a 1-day or a
There was
2-day.
still some savings, but it wasn't as substantial.
Well, and I think that difference was, is at the time, our current provider, which was Republic,
Yeah.
they did not even provide a 2-day service option.
Correct.
Like I set my watch by Republic.
Yep.
They were every time, every day, every week there at my house.
But what happened was, when we had Republic during COVID, there was a lot of complaints and concerns, and they weren't being addressed to the village, so there was some concern. And then, when we got priority in there, now we see that we're having some of the same concerns again, so.
I do know that before, like Jim had said, before we were on council, this council was put together, I did see that Priority did get a lot of other municipalities, and they had a lot of concerns that came through where
They picked up all
They
the
made the
GFL
news.
accounts.
Exactly.
Because GFL, they were involved in litigation, they are not allowed to pick up residential garbage anymore. So that's why Priority picked up all their residential customers.
That's
GFL is a lot of their stuff is being sold to like Padnos,
Yeah.
recycling.
Yeah, they got in some litigation, and legally, they're not allowed to pick up residential trash anymore, so.
they did some no-nos.
So it limits the choices, and.
Yeah, I mean, you got Waste Management, Republic, Community
Yeah.
probably wouldn't be big.
Yeah.
Yeah, community wasn't big enough, they did come and talk to us, I was at the meeting when he came in there. He said he was gonna put a bid together, and he never did. And then once again, I think it was a staffing issue, an equipment issue, he wouldn't be able to meet our needs.
We have a 4-year contract to reconsider this evaluation at that time. It's kicking a dead dog right now, so let's move on, please.
So, we're moving on to Major Street. When I pulled it up, I lost my,
Maybe some
I lost
like to-
my,
Of course you would.
my files.
Did you like my hair comment? Blame it on your hair. Yeah. My only question on the major roads is sundry.
For revenue,
For requested budget, 25, 26.
But it would be revenues.
it's a revenue line item, right, on the
Yes.
first page?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's any miscellaneous expenses, so if something were to happen on a major street, we had to bill somebody, there's not a line item for that, so it'll go through a sundry account.
Okay.
And I think it's at 0 for this next year, and I think that's, if you notice, it's like 1215, they put $1,000 with, it's a catch-all for any kind of revenue that would come in there, so that's why it's on the. But local and major streets, or major and local streets are broken down into 4 subcategories. Street maintenance, winter maintenance, street electric services, and trees. Street maintenance is what your surface, so if we do any kind of patching, any kind of repairs on the street surface, it would come out of those lines. Any materials and stuff we would need would come out of that line. Winter maintenance is snow and ice removal. Traffic services are your signage. And contractually, we contract with Oakland County for our traffic signals, so we have 3 of them. We share one leg at Grange Hall and Saginaw Airport, and then the side downtown there, Saginaw. So they take care of they do all the service on that and maintain it. And then trees, we use a contractor, once a year comes in and does our tree removal and trimming for the year, and then if we have any storm damage, we have a couple contractors that we use if it's in a line or something that the DPW can't handle.
I think an important thing to bring up here too, and Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but like the street maintenance line that we have here, this is just for repairs of what we currently have, like not resurface or replacements. So like that isn't encapsulated in like this fund.
Yeah, and if you look at major streets project costs, that 146, that is the Band-Aid that we put on Broad Street a couple years ago.
Okay. That's, yeah.
And that's what, there's a couple things, and I know we've talked about this in our meetings, but we used chip seal, which is a cold surface repair, and it was a double chip seal. And a couple things happened. The contractor got in later in the year than I wanted. And I brought this up at the pre-con meeting, we were promised it wouldn't happen, it did. And then the weather changed quickly, so he removed a lot of the aggregate sooner than what should have been. And to top it off, the county did a resurface from the village limits south and used hot asphalt. So there's a difference there in hot asphalt and resurfacing versus a double chip seal, which is just a cold application. And once the following year when it warmed up and traffic was on there, some of the ripple effects smoothed out. But what that did was, it's just to try to keep the moisture from getting underneath there and causing potholes. Well, there's not a lot of potholes in that road there, but the driving is not the smoothest because it's a cold application.
So it's to cover so we don't get no more
Yeah, it covers up
damage to the
cracks.
foundation.
Yeah, so
of
it
the
allows,
road.
because we do have sometimes a lengthy freeze thaw cycle here in Michigan, which causes potholes. We were trying to avoid that, and when we presented it to council, it was presented as a Band-Aid for a 5-year fix, and we're going into about year 3, so we've got about 2 more years before you'll start to see that road probably deteriorate.
You mentioned the water penetrating the road surface. Now, the Saginaw repair that we did, got cracks forming.
Yes, and I've seen that, and in the past, we have a crack seal program that we use. We buy the material from the company, they provide the machine, it's just having the labor to be able to do it. So that is definitely on my priority list so that road surface is saved.
Now, we do have a company in Holly now that does asphalt, Premier.
Yes, and
In full disclosure, they did do some work for me before I was on council, so I'm not.
no, and one of my employees, and we've talked about approaching them to see if there's some kind of, win-win situation that we can work out with them to do some of our asphalt repairs.
And they're right there.
I have a question going into this, does any of this anticipate the fact that they are going to open that middle school this fall and our traffic is gonna increase on our roads? Like, are we anticipating being able to handle that?
So what we are doing on that aspect is Chief Narsh and I, as well as the school, to get ahead of the same issue that we're having at the middle school currently. We're doing traffic studies through TIA, I think that's Traffic Improvement Authority, I believe. And using the data that is currently going in and out of the middle school and doing an analysis of how the traffic is, or the pattern is set up right now, basically determine what our thoughts are, and also to see where we can, like where do we need to add additional lights, any of these things. And And so, when, I know, Councilmember Wendell had brought up, his concern about the middle school traffic. I mean, a lot of people did, a lot of people in the community. And so that is something that we've been having ongoing discussions with the middle school, as well as, again, doing like studies in order to, use what limited resources we have in order to mitigate that going forward.
And in terms of road surface, we met with the middle school during their pre-con, and we brought these concerns up. We do have a maintenance agreement for the dirt part of that road, because they're gonna send the buses and the staff out that way. So they are paying the village $10,000 a year for materials, and then we'll maintain that road in terms of grading and stuff like that. Now, the county does our chloriding, so it would be up to them to chloride more often. But in terms of the other secondary roads, like Hastings and Harding that are over there, the village, brought up that concern, and I hate to say it, but it sort of fell on deaf ears on the school's part of it. Their concern was getting this new school in place, and so that would be something that village and staff and council have to address in the future, depending on how fast those roads deteriorate. I can tell you they're not designed for that type of traffic, so, well, it'd just be a matter of, how fast, weather-wise, and what we see over there.
What about just the traffic itself? I mean, there's a lot of people that bring their kids to school instead of using a school bus, just like they did at Sherman Middle School.
And that's what I was talking about with the traffic study specifically. I wasn't as much referring to the wear and tear of the roads or maintenance, as more of talking about, like, how we can actually, make sure that there isn't such traffic congestion on Maple. And they've done a lot of that as far as in their design.
They've
doing
closed East Drive down, so that is basically from Maple all the way back to the middle school. That is gonna be their drive to the school. There won't be any outside traffic being able to come off of Baird or Sherman.
So they'll have enough room for traffic to clear the roadway and go into the parking areas and drop their kids off?
That was their original thought, but until school starts, we know how many people are actually going in there. I foresee a traffic light eventually ending up there, and that may help alleviate stagger some.
I think the left turn, where you're gonna have the concern is the left turn going in from off of Maple.
Okay.
And that's where congestion will be, as everyone's pulling in right, the people will stack up trying to go left down Maple, so. But, again, we're interested to see the traffic study about where people are coming from and all that.
I have a question about the operating supplies and street maintenance and the winter maintenance equipment. The activity and the requested budgets are like significantly different. Is there a reason for that?
In winter maintenance, because this was done in March, we do equipment reports monthly. They haven't been added to this yet, so usually you see it November, December, January, February, March. Those reports haven't been added to this yet. That's why it's at a lower balance than for winter maintenance at that eight. And you see last year it was like 12,984. So it's only at 83, so there was probably, I think Novembers and Decembers have been done. So there's
I'm talking about the one right below it. The equipment one on that one.
that is for purchasing new equipment, and, I'll have to check, because I know we bought some equipment and it was broken up, but it may, not this staff, but previous staff may have broken up differently. And you'll see that when we get to, Water, the equipment line is way over, we can talk about it there too, so.
And on the street maintenance, the operating supplies, it was the previous page.
And once again, I think some of the, I don't, because this is through March 31st.
Yes.
So some of the supplies, like, as we get into the season now, gravel will be bought, some coal patch was bought, and I don't know why, it may have been coded wrong by me or inputted wrong. So like our coal patch comes out of there for road maintenance, our gravel roads, some of this gravel there will be taken out of it. So that's why that line probably is a little bit more right now.
And Lisa and Tessa over the last couple months have been correcting previous journal entries, putting stuff into the right place, and some of it might not have gone into the exact right place yet, and that's why they've been doing a lot of
Right.
changes. And
That's
as
why
we
I
get to
had the question
reconciliation,
for
yeah.
Yeah, because you see 1576 and then request it 10,000.
Right.
It's a big difference.
Yeah.
So,
And that also accounts for, we're getting into that construction season, so you should see some increases in that over the next 3 months.
Now, Brian, in winter maintenance time,
Yes.
do you make certain guys be dedicated to just being plow guys?
No. And what we do is we make our best guesstimate this time of year for these 4 categories, because we have a set amount that we set aside for labor. So we, you know, if we have a harder winter, some of that money, you know, less wages may be used for street maintenance or traffic services. And then with our tree contractor, we get a deal through them, they do the cutting because they're certified to cut around power lines, but we go behind with our truck and chipper.
Yeah, I seen them going around with the.
So, that's where those wages come from. So, but it's we try to do our best guesstimate based on previous years, and then we break that up. So, at the end of the year, we have to do some amendments or journal entries to correct that, because there's only a set amount of wages for the whole local major streets, so.
And as people are, as far as labor concerned, if, you know, they might be scheduled to do plowing, but then if we have a water main break or something, it's all hands on deck, because having, you know, 5, 6 people.
Well, yeah, of course,
you know, like
no.
that's-
I mean, from being a previous landscaper / plower, I know that $6,000 that you're requesting for this budget isn't very much for a season of snow.
Right, and if you look at, like, 23, 24, it was $6,200, and we ended up, and then, the amended budget was 15,000, and the activity through this year is only 4,500. So it all depends on how kind or unkind Mother Nature is.
Oh,
to
of
us.
course, that's
Yeah.
a figure, and the cost of salt and
Yeah,
everything else.
Right, so, and we buy salt through
that.
my deal through the state of Michigan, so, like, I've already had to put the order in March for next year's order. And on an average, the village uses about 600 tons of salt a year. And, going through my deal, sometimes we pay a little bit more than if you were to go to private market, but what I found is communities that, when we have a bad winter, we're able to get salt, they're not. So they're scrambling towards the end of the season, especially if we have a late storms in March and April, they're running low on salt.
Now, do we ever, like, per se, sell some of our salt like to the school district or?
We
other
store the
communities?
salt for the school district, and they come and get it from us, because they buy through my deal too. So their salt is delivered and stuff like that, but no, we don't sell salt per se, just because we don't know what we're gonna have. I try to budget for what we're gonna use and have a little bit of extra, so if we try to sell it, then there's years we might not have extra or need extra and it's not there, so.
Because they do a great job salting, and it's one thing I will not complain about.
Under traffic services,
Yes.
amended budget 24-25 was 41,000. Everything else is in the 5,000-6,000 range. What happened last year?
I'm trying to remember what I did. Oh, you know what, that is an extra zero was added.
Oh, that's a typo.
That's supposed,
That's a
yes,
typo.
supposed to be 4,100.
Got it.
When Debbie did that, I said, thank you, she said, do not spend that money.
Okay,
So,
got
yes,
it.
It was a typo, yes.
Okay.
I was like, wait a minute, so.
New lights coming in.
Is there any other questions on major streets?
One for you.
You're thinking.
I know, I got one. I know, it's just a good time to bring it up. I think it is. So so sensors for roadway, is that something that we've looked at before?
Sensors.
So you know traffic's there. Is that something that would have to be a budgeted item then too?
Like road counts and that kind of stuff?
No, so something have a light, like.
Like street lights.
Oh, well, because we do have a contract with Oakland County, they can do that traffic study, and the new light at Airport, and I believe the light at Grange Hall and Saginaw are all set up with those sensors. And I know Oakland County has, and we advocated that the village be part of this, that they're updating all their lights so that you'll see those cameras up above. So I know we get a lot of complaints for Airport, that it's not long enough for people coming off Airport sometimes. So we advocated, hey, put one of those new signals there, so if there's nobody coming north and southbound on Saginaw, the light will turn on for Airport if someone pulls up there. And I know,
It does too.
yeah, and they were gonna look at it, so,
Anything working with Oakland County has been a good deal for us?
yes, because they have, like, our signal downtown is older, so when they upgrade stuff, they keep stuff in their yard, so they have a lot more access to
So as we're going through our roads and sewers, and water sewer, just, as we move forward, if we're able to fix the revenue problem, which is, again, our big problem, then hopefully we'll be able to add projects on there to tie in water, sewer, roads all at once. So like when we do a section, we would do them in conjunction rather than, doing a road, then having to come in later to do the sewer and tear it up, so.
Just, sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's it.
Okay, sorry. I just had a question on, equipment and vehicle charges under winter maintenance. We didn't have anything set for it last year, and now we're up to 13,000. What?
I don't know why that got zeroed out.
Okay.
That would,
I assume maybe
that was
that's the one,
previous administration, that may have been a typo again.
right, where it
Because
didn't
we
go to the
always
right thing.
have equipment charges in winter maintenance, even if we do have a mild winter, we still have had to go out and salt and do.
Cutting edges on the plow.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
yeah.
Makes sense.
All right, any other questions on major roads? If not, then we will, hearing now, we'll go on to local roads.
And local roads is very similar to major roads. The difference between major and local, the majority of the funding comes from Act 51, but major roads and local roads both have fund balances. Major is better off than local roads, but any shortfalls in local roads has to be covered through general fund money. So that's why it makes it tougher, and I know we get a lot of concerns on Facebook and social media about just patching, just patching roads, but it's tough to do. I shared with Tim the assessment. We did a PACER assessment, which is how we rate roads, back in 2018. And then in 2016 and 2018, road provided an updated cost. And then Tim reached out again and they said, just figure triple whatever those costs were, basically. Because I know we had a lot of concerns on Bevins, where there has been several sewer repairs, the road looking like a checkerboard. And in 2018, just to replace that section of road, which is, I'm gonna say half a mile to be generous, was over 300,000, just for the road service. That wasn't including any water, sewer, or storm. So if you triple that little section of road would be $1 million in states.
Just talking roads, not even talking sewer, water.
Yeah, any kind of other infrastructure.
Just roads alone, the roads that need to be replaced, that are at a level 1, 2, or even 3 on the PACER, the pavement, asphalt, surface, evaluation ratings, it would cost us $20 to $30 million just for.
Now, that doesn't include, does that mean just
That's just
slamming
roads.
some asphalt on top of it?
That would be replacing curb and gutter,
Yeah.
grinding the asphalt down,
Okay, that's what I was curious.
putting new subbase, but that wouldn't include any other infrastructure. And Holly's built on a swamp, and we'll get into a little bit when we get to storm or sewer, but our storm sewer system is in need of a lot of repair. It's undersized, we've had some development, and it hasn't been improved upon, so that's part of the problem. Like I talked about the freeze-thaw cycle, when you have standing water on the road, because it can't get to a drain, or there isn't a drain available, then it freezes and breaks the pavement up, curbs up, so it just adds to our expense.
The expansion you're talking about is outside, in the township expansion that puts a bigger load on our,
No, just in the village itself, along Saginaw, like when they did the Dollar Tree, I mean, that was a vacant lot, and then where the fire station is, that was a
and
repair.
they tie right in.
They tie right in. There's only a 12-inch, and a lot of those storm sewers here in the village are corrugated metal pipe. So it's a galvanized culvert, so a lot of times there's no bottom in them, because they've rusted out over the years. So, at a 12-inch capacity, so a lot of times that's where you see the surcharge at Elm and Saginaw when we have a large rainstorm, or any of the other places, because the system surcharges, the system just doesn't have the capacity to take these rains that we get, we get a half inch in 30 minutes, there's nowhere for it to go.
And it does surge because I've seen it come down airport.
Yeah.
We had a big fiasco with my house and everything else, and where it goes up to the muffler shop, it's only, like he said, 12 inches, and it's old, and it's definitely needs to be some work done to it because.
Yeah, we have the Patterson drain, that's a county drain, and that's a 42-inch drain, and that runs diagonally. I mean, it starts on the back So I know George Cullis and previous administration have tried to work with the drain commission to get us moved up on that priority list.
For the Patterson drain?
For the Patterson drain, for
Yeah.
repairs and maintenance and that kind of stuff.
Didn't they hit that on Saginaw right in front of Dollar General?
No, we tied into that when we replaced underneath Saginaw, when we redid Saginaw as part of that project a few years ago.
Under revenue, sundry again, it's gone from 2 to 18. What's going on there?
The ten is for the, as Brian was just talking about, the 10,000 for the school pays that, the maintenance. This was just, you know, if you saw me talking to Tessa, Tim and Brian, wasn't there $17,000 coming in somewhere like for CDBG for park, or some benches along somewhere for major and local roads? Because it seems like this $8,600 we split between major and local roads.
I don't know why it would go to, if it were, it would have gone to 101.
That would have been trees. That's probably why it's.
Oh,
it's
trees.
Okay,
trees.
trees. That's what it is. So he was talking about those CDBG monies, the 17,000, so we just split it between major and local.
Yeah, that would be the
roads.
trees, that would be the trees.
I knew
Okay.
something, I something.
Along a road.
Yeah.
Other than the curb.
So like I said, local streets is very similar to major streets, so, a lot of the expenses on the surface is patching. The new administration, I mean, we're working, trying to come up with plans and funding to figure out, and that's, Tim has talked about, you know, the decisions that we'll have to make as a whole, as staff and council, what funding mechanisms can we use to start doing some of these capital projects so we can see improvements. Because I mentioned that Roe did that study, and they also made a recommendation that the village spend $1 million a year on roads to maintain the current level, and that was in 2018. So I don't think we've spent quite that much.
Under wages full-time, traffic services, 23-24 was $500. Is that another one of those typos, you think?
No, that's, like I said, we do our best guesstimate when we do these to break up the overall amount of money that we have in wages. And, that just means that we didn't have anybody run these signs over. I did, a couple years ago, I gotta remember, one side, I split the village in half on Saginaw, east and west, and I had to go out and make a list, and we replaced all the damaged and worn out signs on one side. I have a list for the other side, I just haven't got,
Shame on you.
yeah, I just haven't got the stuff ordered and the manpower out there to start changing that. Because there was some changes done, and I won't bore you with the high prismatic signs versus regular. They're supposed to be able to reflect at a certain percentage at a certain time. So there's all kinds of rules and regulations for that. But we're looking at upgrading our signs and our posts so that things look better.
You did mention signs like getting damaged or ran over. Now, if a person, let's say myself or somebody else ran over a sign, wouldn't our insurance company have to reimburse for that sign? If
Not
you
necessarily
guys knew
our
it.
insurance company, well, depending.
No, I'm saying like my personal insurance.
Yeah, if there was a police report made, we could submit a bill and get reimbursement for it.
So we can recoup some of that?
Yes.
Okay.
Under utility administration, unemployment went from $8, $25, $1 to $5,000.
Is that the 552-718, is that the one you're looking at?
552-717.
And I think that's just broken down. We've had released employees and they've tried to collect unemployment, so depending on which type of employee, what department they worked in, it's broken down based on that sheet that they talked about. If he was a 5, 10, 20%, if he came out of local major streets, then that percentage would be what, if we had to pay any kind of unemployment. They just break it down, whatever the cost was.
Thank you.
Because that's, in my department, because I have so many budgets, my employees are broken down, you know, to get the overall payroll for them, they're broken down to different departments, so, depending on what happened, those costs will fluctuate depending on which employee it was too, so.
Anything else for local roads?
parts of sewer that I'm responsible for. We have the collection system, which is the 590-548, and then we have the treatment, which is the 590-555. So anything till it gets to the plant is part of the collection system. Once it gets to the end of the airport, then it's part of the treatment budget. So, in the collection system, we do have 13 lift stations. And you'll notice under project costs, and that's been on there before, and it's due to our engineers and our vendor not getting that information. That's the Apollo Street lift station. I don't really like to talk about it, I don't want to jinx it, but we're currently running on one pump. They usually have 2 pumps in them for redundancy. That services all of the mobile home communities off of Grange Hall and part of the Holly Foods Plaza. So, and that was sold to the village, I wanna say early 80s for $1. It's probably the best dollar that guy ever made, and ran to the bank with it, but there's been electrical panel upgrade and some minor repairs. When I say minor, some railing systems and stuff like that, but the overall station itself is well over 40 years old, probably more like 50 or 60.
What's the estimated lifespan of a station like that?
Probably 30 to 40 years. And because the older stations are what I call the old tin can stations, they're made out of, you know,
Corrugated steel.
well, no, they're metal material, but because Holly's built on a swamp, the ground is very corrosive, so you get these things, you know, that station is probably about 25, 30 foot deep. So,
And that's in the water?
yeah, well, around it, I mean,
Yeah.
the pit itself fills up with raw sewage, and then it's pumped into the system and makes its way down to the treatment center. So we're looking at replacing that. There is several others that are on a capital improvement list to be replaced over the next few years. But at that cost, you can see that it's, you know, they just get more expensive depending on where they're at and what.
Are we talking about project costs? Is that what you're talking
Yeah,
about?
the 850,
Yeah.
that's for
Yeah.
that's for that replacement. That's the only really major change. If you look at the equipment right below that, I have a generator in there and the vehicle replacement. We also have some payments due on a couple pieces of equipment that we leased, the backhaul and the toolcat. When I talk about generators, we have on-site generators at the DPW, the police department, wastewater treatment plant, water treatment plant. Then we have portable generators for our lift stations. And we have about 3 of them. They're 1970s vintage. They're old style, so we do have a local contractor or mechanic in town that's still able to work on them. He's got them back up and running for us. But they are very finicky, and when we need them, we need them. And sometimes it's a little scary when you come in the middle of the night and rainstorm and you're like, click, 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 click. It's like,
You're like, oh, no.
So the portable generators, we're actually moving out there
yes,
to the site.
yes.
Are they all gas powered? Liquid gas?
Yes. The newer ones we'll look at with diesel, but yes, the older style ones are gas. And we've done some changes to them, and we're running rec fuel for them, because what happens with regular gas is the condensation builds up, and that causes the issues that they don't want to start. So,
Could there be any grants or anything for any of that equipment, for our generators and that there?
we can look through our risk management to see what's available. I know a lot of times when communities upgrade to their their lift stations, they put on-site generators in them. But because we have 13 of them, it's, you know, and at $850,000 just for the station itself, to add another 50, 75,000 in there, we're better off buying a portable generator that we could use somewhere else along with it, instead of just having it dedicated there, because once you do that, then you have annual maintenance on it, repairs, that kind of stuff. In talking with other communities, like I'll use Milford, for example. I talked to the former director, and he's like, you don't have a generator for every lift station? I'm like, well, how many lift stations do you have in Milford? He says, well, we had 3, we got rid of 1, and we're down to 2. I said, well, I have 13.
Yeah.
He goes, well, yeah, we don't even have a storage facility to store 13 generators, let alone maintain 13 generators. So that's one of the
How long before we have an endorsement full?
Usually, we can rotate them around, and you've got like a 12 to 24-hour window, depending on
Okay.
the amount of flow and how long the power's out.
So
The longest I think we've had to go is like 2 days.
Chemicals is listed in two places. They have the same number. One says 5,000, one says 37,000.
Which one is that?
It's 555-740. Oh, sorry, it is different numbers. One is 548-740 and the other is 555-740.
Yeah, one is, like I said, 548 is collections, so that's anything before it gets to the plant. 555 is the treatment.
Treatment after, got it,
facility
okay.
itself. So we use different chemicals.
So I don't have questions on the treatment after. On the treatment before, there was no activity in 23 and 4, and that's curious on the receiving end.
And I'm not sure why, because we use Floatsol, Big Yellow, and enzymes for the lift stations, so I know.
That should have been there.
There should have been
Okay.
there, so I'm not sure what happened there, because, yeah, I buy Floatsol every year, I buy Big Yellow, and Floatsol is just it's a petroleum-based project that stops the oils and greases from building up inside the lift stations. And then the Big Yellow is a chemical that when it hits water, it turns 700 degrees, so it liquefies any solids.
Operating supplies right there had an enormous shift from 2,000 to 25 and then 4,000. Well, sorry, that 4,000 is the activity so far, but the request is 25 again, which I suppose matches last year, but 23-24 was only $3,000, not even $2,200.
And I think a lot of that had to do with staffing issues. We weren't able to do a lot
Okay.
in the system. So, but I know we need to replace the hose on the sewer jet. It covers nozzles, gloves, any kind of PPE, the floats that monitor or tell the lift stations when to turn on and off. That all that stuff comes out of there. So, and a lot of some of that cost has gone down because of the program that we're in. I want to say we lease pumps for 11 of our lift stations. So it's a 5-year program where we pay a fixed rate and they come out and do annual maintenance. And if there's any issues because of their equipment, it's all covered under that, so.
Now, this insurance 555-825, is that for building or equipment?
That would be,
That's the liability insurance.
A liability, okay.
And then RMA, we break it in between the funds. So we just haven't gotten the bill yet, so I don't know what it's going to be.
Okay.
a lot of these items, some of the administration items, they're one-time, once-a-year type things. So if they're not on there yet, they probably haven't been billed out yet, so that's why they're at zero.
Okay.
For repairs and maintenance under 548, looks like we budgeted 35,000 last year, but we spent 71, and now we're back to budgeting 35.
And that was because we had an issue with some pumps.
Okay.
So the 2 lift stations that we didn't have, that aren't part of that program, we had to replace pumps.
So, and we're not anticipating having to do that again this year.
No, usually you can get, it's 5 years before you start to see issues. They recommend that pumps be replaced at 10, so hopefully we bought ourselves some time with those, so.
So again, we're in the red $964,000 when it's all said and done as of March 31st.
Is that March 31st or is that the end of the year?
Oh, well, I guess.
Well, that would be for our projected budget.
So we are, I mean, these are just basic maintenance. This is not capital improvements. You're not looking at replacing pumps or anything. This is just to stay.
It has the,
Well, the project cost of 850.
Yeah, the 850 for next year is in there.
Okay.
And water and sewer do have fund balances, but that's something that we'll probably talk about at the end. And we talked a little bit about it in the finance committee. You know, there's 2 types of ways to look at it: pay as you go, and the people using the system are paying for it as they're using it. Or like I like to say, you kick the can down the road and you let the next generation or 2 generations worry about, hey, I gotta pay for grandma's pump now. And so,
There is one other project cost for $250, and I'm sorry if I missed you say what that one was for. That is number 555-967.
and that is it 548 or 555?
555.
And that is for PLC upgrades at the wastewater plant. The PLCs that are currently in there, and that's programmable logic controls. My predecessor, Tim Stuckup, did an excellent job of making everything automated over there. 24/7 operation, but it's not manned 24/7. The PLCs that are currently in there, the only way you can get them is if you buy them off of eBay, and then you take the chance that they're gonna work or not work. That's how old they are, they're like first generation. So we have the PLCs, but the company that we used to do the upgrade at the water plant, we're not gonna use at the wastewater plant. So we're working with another vendor to get costs for that, so that's what we're trying, we'll cover that cost.
So you talk a little about what a PLC does, for instance.
It's a programmable logic control, so what it does is it tells pumps to kick on and off automatically. It monitors flow, it monitors, chemical injections, amount of chemicals and stuff like that. It gives you alarms, it turns things on and off automatically that normally so you don't have an operator running through the plant on a regular basis trying to, if flow changes, it automatically changes the flow rate in the pumps, the chemical feed pumps, all that stuff. So it's all automated instead of having to have somebody run and say, hey, turn this up a little bit, then run back up and say, yeah, everything's, our tests are coming out right, so,
So one-time cost versus yearly
yes.
fees
Yes.
for salaries.
And,
Was that the upgrades that we already voted on, like the software? Is that?
no,
also-
the software is for keeping track of the data that these PLCs generate,
Okay.
that we have to report to Eagle on a monthly basis.
Now, Brian, when I did do a tour with you in the wastewater treatment plant,
Yeah.
there was, you were mentioning something about, there was 3 pumps that were gonna be, I don't know what they were, but 3 things that were gonna be taken out of service eventually because we didn't.
Those are the RBCs, and if you look, I think part of that is, we have to test, because we have to prove to Eagle that it's not a vital function in our treatment process.
And once we finally did, it was
Yeah, we'll be
break
able to
down.
remove those, and those are, there's 3 trains over there, one is currently operational, but they're a large expense on utility costs and maintenance costs. And by eliminating those and doing an upgrade to a microfilter screen, it'll also eliminate some pinch points, so that if we do have these high flows at certain times, we'll be able to treat them faster and more efficiently.
Are we staffed appropriately for this operation?
Yes and no. We're currently able to operate and maintain what we have. By Eagle standards, they're gonna say we're a little bit shy, but because DPW takes care of the collection system, that helps offset the number of employees that Eagle would like to see on site.
So what are we shy of?
Because it's a 24/7 operation and we only run one shift, they would, I think their recommendation is 6 employees at the wastewater plant.
And we got what?
4.
And don't they gotta have a certain class too? I mean, there is.
Well, we're with, they call, wastewater certifications are A, B, C, D, and we're a B plant, and that's based on the size of your population and the amount of water that you treat. And Tom Wood, the superintendent, currently has a B license, and we have one other operator there with a C license. We have 2 newer employees. The state mandates they have to have a certain number of hours before they test. They'll be eligible to test this fall, and both of them are.
And you're licensed too, right? You got the.
Well, I have a water license, and based on the number of hours, you have to apply, so I argue with the state all the time, because I call it the good old boy club on the wastewater side, they force you down this,
Little channel.
yeah. And in smaller communities, it's tough because we do more than one thing, where larger communities, they have wastewater, and they have 3 shifts, and they have a lab guy,
And that's all they
and that's all they do all day, where our guys rotate through the lab, they rotate through the plant, doing maintenance.
And then next thing they're throwing cold patch.
Yeah, well, not at the wastewater plant, there's 4 guys dedicated, that's all they do every day, so,
And the individuals that are training, is that something we're helping with too, is training?
yes.
Okay.
And there's training budgets in all the line items there, and so we break it up. If they work at the DPW, then they're, like, we have to have certifications for a boom truck, PPE, and we try to do trainings and take money out of all the budgets. So it covers.
I like the idea of multiple rated people, like Tom over there, that's really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, no, go ahead.
For the wastewater treatment plant, for the licensing that we have to have, now, they can't go get trained through us, get their license through us, and then decide to jump ship because somebody else is paying more. Are we pretty comfortable on wages?
Yes and no. Hourly wage, we're a little bit more, but because of the benefit package and the costs associated, what the employee pays, we're comparable. I always use Fenton as an example. On paper, they make $2 more an hour at the DPW, but they're paying about $2 an hour to have healthcare.
All right,
So it's a wash.
if there's no more questions on sewer, let's take a break.
Pretty sound good.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, sorry, Buster's got a question.
Okay.
I didn't get just
What would happen if, let's say, the person that has all the license and everything right now at our sewer plant, will we have anybody to replace that person?
Currently, no. We're working, we have a couple younger employees that started that are willing to take it, but based on the criteria that the state, they had to have so many hours in. So to get to a B license takes about 5 years. So like when Tim Stalcup left, we used Highland Treatment. There is other companies out there, but once again, it's expense. They weren't there every day like our operator is, or our, operators are. They came in a couple hours a day, just did some cursory review. Yep, you're good, do this, do that. And
So
in the long run, it ends up,
what would we do then? Have to bring somebody in
yeah, we have
under a contract basis?
contract basis and then advertise to try to recruit somebody. And that's what we did when we hired Tom Woods. He came from Oakland County. He had just taken his B license, got it, and was ready to move on because there wasn't an opportunity for him with the county at the time, so.
And I think we're lucky to have him. He's very knowledgeable.
Yes, yeah, and he's a local person. He grew up in the community, went to Holly High School, so.
Thank you.
And I do suggest to the council, anybody who would like to tour it, I would ask Brian for a tour, because it is fascinating to see.
Let's break till 10:30.
just asked me, ran the light and smacked somebody from, Genesis Hospital, broke her arm.
Oh, goodness. Oh, yeah? Oh, it's about an hour and a half after she goes to bed, she wakes up knocking on her door, coming in there.
See, our youngest is still in crib, so. Well, we can't let her ride.
All right, and we're back. So my takeaway, Brian, if I'm understanding this correctly, is that we are currently barely affording operating. We are not affording maintenance.
Correct, well, improvements, so if you see the 800.
Is a pump really an improvement, or is that something that we need to maintain our
Yeah, that's
systems?
maintenance. Yeah, that's maintenance, but the whole station itself needs to be upgraded. So
Yeah.
that would be like a
We're
capital.
definitely not affording that,
Yeah,
okay.
so that's 850,000, and, that's what puts us over on the budget. So
Yeah.
That's where you'd have to draw from fund balance.
Okay,
Now, fund balance and water and sewer are in okay shape, I'm not gonna say great shape, and I believe by our last auditor, they're at the recommended levels. But we've had this discussion between staff is, if we keep drawing 850,000 to $1 million out of there every year, pretty soon we're in the same boat when we had to raise our rates and have the base rate be raised, 10 years ago when I first started, or 15 years ago now, when we first started that,
This is just gonna upgrade our sewer plant?
No, there's upgrades at the sewer plant for the PLCs, but the lift station is the large
Critical
cost.
one.
And the lift stations
That
too?
puts us over, yes, and
Okay.
there's about 4 more that are in that same age category and type of, material that they were.
And then that would take care of,
Yeah, but then you're, once you do these things, you've got 30 years to figure out where you're gonna be
okay.
for the next ones. But,
Now, can you finance that, you think, do you have to pay for it upfront all at once, or?
yeah, the vendor's not gonna give you, the vendors wanna be paid, they're not gonna, the contract.
Well, then, can we give a loan on that, you think?
Well, that's what the bond issue that we're talking, the renewal of the bonds that the finance committee's been discussing, some of those projects are in there. And that's why, certain things, and I think we talked with, Plant Moran, like any project under $1 million, you're probably better off paying cash for. There's a threshold for getting bonds or loans and stuff like that. The paperwork and the amount of work to get that amount of money is, and I say $1 million, like it's not a lot of money, but it is. But when you look at, $1 million a mile for just street resurfacing and probably $3 million without infrastructure, it's not. So, they say $1 million or less, you're better off paying cash per se instead of financing it, paying it over 20 years or.
Should we better off maybe replace 2 pumps instead of 1 then, or?
Well, all our lift stations, I have redundancy, they all have 2 pumps in them. This one is just operating on 1 based on the problems that we've had there. The rail system, there's a second pump in there, we just can't get it to seat properly, so sometimes it wants to work, sometimes it doesn't, but,
Oh, it's just cranky.
yeah, so.
So you had said there's 4 more things that need to be tended to after these 2 proposed projects?
There's 4 more lift stations that need to be looked at short-term rather than long-term for replacement. And, Road did an assessment, and I'll get that to Tim, and we can discuss that when we look at, bond issues and that kind of stuff, what those expenses will be as part of that. They did an evaluation of all our lift stations, and that's where I came up with the 5 that are the old style. I call them tin cans, for lack of a better term.
Okay, moving on to water.
And water is similar to wastewater in terms that it's a fund that is supposed to operate separately, similar to a business. We're supposed to cover all our expenses. That's why we look at, increases in our water and sewer rates on a regular basis as staff, and then make recommendations to council for adoption of those rates. We have water treatment. We have our own water treatment plant where we remove arsenic through a chlorine bonding process. So all the water is arsenic free. We do get concerns and complaints about hardness of our water. It is well water. We have 4 wells off of Winifred, and there's moderate levels of calcium in that water. So that's the white residue that a lot of people complain about. It's not the friendliest to small appliances, ice makers, that kind of stuff. If we were to look at putting the whole water softening system plus the maintenance of that system.
One thing I had looked at previously with the water softener treatment plant is once you start putting soft water through the pipes that only have hard water, does that do something to the pipes then to break everything free?
It depends on how soft you make the water. I mean, a zero hardness water is very corrosive to like stainless steel appliances. We have several different materials in our system. So like the old cast iron pipe, we have cement pipe, we have ductile iron pipe. So depending on how much corrosion's there, you could get some, breaking down of those pipes and cause more issues than having soft water. And those, it's gonna take a while. When I first started here, we do hydrant flushing in the spring. We're getting ready to do it again this spring. We did it twice a year, and it would take 2 days to do it. Because we started removing the arsenic by bonding it to the iron, our system, a lot of the iron has been removed. Now we can do it in about 6 hours on one day, and one time a year.
And that's flushing the hydrants?
Flushing the hydrants, yes. So we try to do that on dead ends or areas that don't have a lot of flow, so that, people don't complain that they got stale water or they get that, So we try to do it that way, but once again, that's unmetered water, so it's water loss, so that adds to the cost of operating the system.
The Falk Road dump,
Yes.
what's our responsibility there? I see that we had 0 activity in 23-24, 25,000 in 25. We've done 12,000 so far this year, requesting 25.
In 23-24, we didn't have any testing that was required. That 12.5, I think, is going to go back down to 0, because I think that was,
Grant-based, right?
yeah, that was the fencing that was the tree company that did the removal and prep work for the fence that went up there. And then requested 25, because this year we are gonna be required to do more testing again. There's monitoring wells out there. And so Eagle, I think we're on an every other year schedule where we have to test for certain PFAS, heavy metals. There's a whole list of stuff that they test those monitoring wells for. So we'll be on the hook for those testing costs.
Okay, thank you. That's my only question on water. Anyone else?
On the water, you have a tower antenna leased by Nextel, and there's no activity to the 31st, and then you're asking for 25,000?
That's right. That's revenue. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
We haven't billed them yet. They haven't paid their bill yet this year.
I didn't think Nextel existed.
Well, they don't. It was originally Sprint now, I believe, or
Nope.
T-Mobile. T-Mobile, yes.
Oh, so we just don't got the correct name, but it's still.
Yeah, they're on the tower at the DPW. So, yes.
So we reached out to them to see when they're gonna pay us, because they should have paid us already.
Yeah, so.
Do we charge them late fees?
We'd have to go through the contract.
I
Yeah,
was just asking.
The contract expired during the transition from Nextel Sprint to T-Mobile. Previous administration renegotiated it, and I believe it's a 5-year contract again.
I think it's a 5-year with a 5-year extension as well. I haven't looked through it in depth, but.
I think it's either 1 or 2 extensions, so it's pretty much a 15-year contract. But in this one, we made sure that there's built-in automatic increases in it, so it's not a flat rate for 15 years, like the old one stayed pretty steady for a long time. We put automatic increases in there, and they're compounded, so.
Do they have exclusivity on that water tower?
No, I do not believe so.
They're the only ones up there. I wouldn't.
Currently?
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend putting anybody else up there.
We got anybody in the one by the old fire department?
Fire department.
The old, or the next police station?
The historic tower.
That's not tall enough, and the one up on Quick Road, I wouldn't recommend.
Two trees.
Well, no, because they're 150 feet, they're the highest elevation. If you look at, that tower will actually sit on top of the DPW tower based on elevation. That's why we have the 2 different pressure zones. But I wouldn't recommend having equipment, because you see here the cost, or the revenue is minimal versus the access. And we've had, since I've been here, we've had several issues with Sprint, Nextel, T-Mobile, with access and their equipment and doing the right thing, so.
It doesn't affect our.
No, it doesn't affect us, it's just,
Somebody's gotta be there for them to access.
yeah, it's a hassle, and we've implemented some rules, and they get, yeah, it's just.
We have good T-Mobile service though.
Hey!
Yeah, it's real good here.
Anyone else on water? Okay. Debt services review?
Do you have anything on that as far as?
Well, just for the debt services, that's just the payment of the bonds and then the payment of the interest. And I know that there's a few bonds that, again, maybe we had spoken on the finance committee that we have to take a look at potentially renewing.
Renewing or issuing new bonds. There was a smaller bond that was issued when we did the Saginaw Street project because we did replace about 1,700 feet of water main. And I think that bond was a couple $1 million that was issued for that project. That gives you an idea of what $2 million will get you, about 1,700 feet of water.
Much.
Yeah.
Let's see. So, I guess that brings us to the discussion of course of action, like next steps. Again, we're just advisors at this point as far as, we just are gonna provide course of action if council wants to pursue those. And so the things that we've talked about, one of them is, going through a back registry special assessment. So I've got just, we talked about this briefly, I've got a couple points to, kind of like the next steps on this if we were to pursue this, which I think is, in my opinion, the only feasible thing that we can do in, short term in order to, correct some of these issues. So, 1233 is an act to provide police and fire protection for townships and for certain areas in townships, certain incorporated villages, and certain cities to authorize contracting for fire and police protection, to authorize the purchase of fire, police equipment, and maintenance, and operations of the equipment to provide for the defraying of the cost of the equipment, to authorize the creation of a special assessment district for the levying and collection of special assessments, to authorize the issuance of special assessment bonds in the anticipation of collection of special assessments and the advancement of the amount necessary to pay such bonds, and provide for the reimbursement of such advances by reassessment necessary to authorize collection of fees for emergency services in townships and other municipalities. That's kind of what we were looking at right there for it. To authorize the creation of administrative boards and prescribe their powers and duties, provide for appointment of traffic officers. But really, it's the collection of fees for certain emergency services. If we look at it, so under this act, so a qualified municipality is one with a population of less than 15,500 people. The village of Holly, obviously, with a population of 6,000, approximately 6,000, is a qualified city under this act. So the first step for us would be that the village council would have to establish a special assessment district. And because everyone would benefit from the police and fire, the special assessment district would be the entire village, essentially. And so the next thing would be that we would have to determine the annual amount that we want to assess in this district. There's the estimated the cost expenses for police and fire, any apparatus, equipment, housing. Really, we're talking mostly just operational costs. And we're gonna do some analysis and provide, what we believe, how many mills we would have to do in order to just cover our expenses and where we need to go, and then provide that to council. And then from that, so we create a special assessment district, then we have to conduct a public hearing on the amount, for transparency with the public, distribution of the special assessment levy in compliance with OMA. So we'd have to publish it in a newspaper, general circulation in the village, 10 days before, and we'd also notice to all our recorded property owners within the districts, and it has to be received at least 10 days before the hearing as well. So this isn't something we do quick, but it's something, we'd probably use our water bill data or utility billing data in order to reach out to all of our residents. And at the time, we do a public hearing for anyone to, again, it's not a popular process because, again, we're levying a tax without a vote. And so this will be an opportunity for us to communicate with public basically the steps we'd have to take next in order to do a special assessment.
Can we do like, a cost assessment of what it would be for us to contract to the county or state to show that versus what we're paying?
Yeah, so for the state, there is no cost to it, but there's a cost to service expectations. And so really what we would lose. What we would lose is,
Random dance party.
Thanks, Mom.
we would lose,
Take this and put it in the truck, please.
our response time would go down from like a couple minutes to 25, 30 minutes.
Sorry about that.
And like we would lose a lot of our, or historically you see that places that get rid of their police lose their banks, they lose their commercial districts, they lose their social district kind of thing, because a lot of that is associated. And that's because banks want the protection of the local police and the response times of all of that.
I'm just saying so that when we're presenting this argument to the community,
Yeah.
they're seeing the different options
yeah.
and then seeing this of like,
Yeah.
if we don't do this,
Yeah, so pros and cons list of all the
Yeah.
options.
right?
Yep, and we will provide all of that. And with Oakland County, I mean, it would be astronomically higher, but we'll provide the exact numbers and just look at where like comparable communities have been. And they've kind of priced themselves out of the market to support. And it would be still, we wouldn't have the same response time or any of that.
And it probably is important for the people that are watching at home that didn't get a chance yet to watch the last meeting. The reason this is even being discussed is budget deficit.
Yeah.
And one of the questions I had for you was, you said short term. So in your definition, what would a short term special assessment be? Are we talking 10 years, 5 years?
So, so ideally, and so the next portion I'm gonna cover is gonna be I love the transition. So essentially, hopefully, we don't have to do this until we can actually bring it to the vote to the people and do what would be a Headley override. And, Councilmember Koskela brought up, we talked about last time, what brought us here. And so if you are only watching this at home, let me see where we're at in if I'm on the camera or if I'm on us. All right, I will switch it over to, so people at home can see the screen later. So our millage rate has not changed since 1982. In 1982, per charter, we established 20 mills as like, this is our operating budget that we believe the village needs in order to successfully do their operations at 20 mil. So through the last, since 1982, we've had Headley rollbacks, and I can kind of show you, I'm trying to pull up my slide control so I have some hidden slides that I was going to pull up if needed, and it's not looking like I can do that. Let's see. Well, essentially, since 1982, it's just been rolled back until the point where we're at right now, which next year it's going to be 11.3 something from that 20 that we originally had. So the Headley Amendment, because I'm sure a lot of people like watching at home are not really familiar. 1978, voters approved an amendment to our Constitution known as the Headley Amendment. It protected property owners from increases in taxes by rolling back the tax rates and millages so that growth would not exceed the rate of inflation from the existing tax base. So previous to 1994, which I'll talk about Proposal A in a second, is that the communities were able to roll back up. Like if they could bring their amendments back up because of Proposal A. Voters approved Proposal A, which separated taxable value from the state equalized value caps and increases in the taxable value of 5% of the rate of inflation, whichever is less. So the effect of Headley and Proposal A together meant that millage rates are permanently reduced or rolled back during periods of economic growth, which achieves the desired outcome of protecting taxpayers when taxes are too high. However, during periods of economic recession, when property values decline, there's no currently any mechanism to restore millage rates to the amounts voters originally approved. So that's why we would have to do a Headley override, because we no longer can do the rollback ups per how we used to be able to do it before Proposal A occurred in 1994. And how that process works, we first so I think that we would do these things in conjunction if we were to go this route. We do a special assessment, say, hey, we need to stop the bleeding right now because we can't continue to operate in the deficit. So we are gonna do this special assessment until we have the long-term solution, which is going to be a Headley override, hopefully. And we would establish where our millage rate needs to be. We could not exceed the 20 mils that we originally established per our charter, because that's the max that our charter allows. We determine that amount. We create the ballot language that explains what the tax increase is. The proposal is placed on the ballot for a public vote during general election or special election if we decide. A simple majority of voters are required for approval. If approved, we can then implement the new tax rates, so that would be the longer term solution. However, it's still subject to the Headley rollback. So it's something that we constantly want to monitor year after year to make sure that we are at the rate that we want to be, so that we're not in this situation where it's been 43 years and not been touched. Is that all I have for on Headley? Yeah, that's all I have for on Headley. So that's the longer term solution for it. And once we would have the Headley override done, then we would hopefully be able to just remove the special assessment. We no longer do the special assessment. When Lisa does, or the clerk treasurer submits our 4029 to our tax levels, we would then remove the special assessment and only have our new taxable value based on our Headley override.
Is there a way to get to, I hope people at home will get mad at me for saying this, but we're allowed 20 mils, but that was back in 1982, or 80, whatever year.
Yeah.
Is there a way to say, well, we still can operate in that, or actually we need 25 mils now, due to inflation and everything else, operate properly?
Yeah, I don't think that we wouldn't need that, but if we were to need to do that, we would have to amend the charter. We'd have to, do a charter amendment in order to achieve that.
And that takes a vote of the people.
And that would take a vote of the people as well, correct? So, again, the special assessments don't require a vote of the people. We would have to have it reviewed annually, but they last up to, I think, 10 years. And I think we're able to, I think it's 15 years, and we can assess up to 10 mils. And that is not subject to Headley rollbacks if we were to go that route.
And would we want to go just enough to cover what we're deficiting right now, or would we want to go a little bit more so we had a cushion?
Well, that's something that we're going to have to actually do some analysis of to determine exactly where we would need to be. We don't want to we're never in the business to make money. Like,
Well, I'm not going to say cushion,
yeah.
I mean, we got extra money, we can go buy extra flour.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, so when we know that, we have an emergency. that
I
came
would
up,
say that,
we ain't got to fret it.
so, I mean, as you can see, if you watched our last video, people at home, that our police, I think it was 1.9 million this year, our fires, like 900,000, I believe. And so we would really just have to, we want to have enough that we can offset the general fund so that we're not in a complete deficit. I think that just to cover our expenses is the best policy. I mean, obviously keep it just as close as we can to be fiscally responsible, but also be responsible to the voters since they didn't have a vote in this. And that if we were to have anything in excess, we would probably do that in the Headley override. So we can start doing capital improvements and all these other things. Again, because then that's the voters choosing that they want to prioritize these, improved sewer systems. And then in that override and all of this, we would also provide specifically what services, we would give a list of what all these services would be that they would get out of this. And what it's supposed to cover, as well as within the special assessment, it would outline all this as well.
So like what Amber Kyer, Councilwoman Kyer said, it's showing the difference of what we have. If we don't do the special assessment, we're looking at possibly having to go to the county and state for the police and fire.
If we don't do this special assessment, we're looking at the county and state coming in, or the state coming in and taking over our village.
Which is, then they decide and we don't have any say.
Yeah, we wouldn't have any say.
So to that point, I was doing some research on that, and Isabella County had a millage, so Mount Pleasant area, they had a millage, and the voters said, nope, we don't want to raise taxes. So the sheriff's department said, okay, 20 deputies are now gone. And the Michigan State Police came back and said, well, we're now gonna reposition people because you guys don't have the troop, or the deputies there. So the Michigan State Police actually brought more resources in, and they said, nope, we'll still be able to handle the calls. So I know we've heard that, the Groveland, it's not an office or whatever it is over there, the annex or whatever. Yeah, man station, they only have 2 offices and they're supposed to have a ton more. It may be the case too, once we say, hey, we're getting rid of our fire department or police department, they now redeploy more people here. But personally, I won't do anything that makes my family less safe or any of your families less safe either.
100% agree.
And if it comes back to them saying, no, we're not gonna reposition people, you guys are up.
Chief Narsh can talk. Chief
I mean, I
Narsh-
feel like that's a little bit panicked, right? Of like, all of a sudden, robbers are gonna jump into my house. Like, I mean, most of our police is drunk drivers and domestic disturbance.
Or
I'm
we
just
have
saying, I don't wanna
officers
go
right next
after
to
it like a panic attack, like, oh, you guys, your stuff is just gonna get vandals
gonna
all
come
over
steal
the
your
road
stuff
and stuff
tomorrow.
because we get rid of our cops. I mean,
Not only that, but I think your
it's a little
insurance rates are likely to
dramatic.
go up because we don't have a manned officer here, out 24/7. So I think there's other options other things that are gonna happen than just,
Code
you know,
enforcement's gone. That's.
a couple of things that are gonna happen.
The SROs are gone. We also currently, and I don't remember off the top of my head, maybe Chief Narsh can fill us in on how much mutual aid we've run to the township because of their lack of policing out there with just having state too.
It's gone up,
We
it's
have-
gone up by
They're sitting where
180%.
they're sitting
We have,
because
yeah, we have to have a clear thing that's not panic inducing, is all I'm saying.
Right.
Because there are other communities that exist without police.
But.
Which
yeah,
ones?
Groveland, Springfield,
So which has a big community like this though?
Davisburg. I mean, I'm-
Transactions through Oakland County, they pay no.
That's what I mean, but we would too, like, I'm saying, just because we didn't have a police force, doesn't mean that vandals are gonna be out on the roads every day and like breaking into your house. I'm
Right.
just, I don't wanna panic people.
I agree. I think
No, I agree there too.
as residents of both the township and the village, that is maybe something that has to be talked about. And, you know, we're separate because we're a village, but those outside communities like Springfield and Groveland, their townships pay millages for their police and fire.
Right, they're special
Which
assessments.
our
Do-
Holly Township does not cover us for any police and
Do
fire.
we see how
They
many?
do cover us for fire.
No, they have NAFCA for
Which
township, and
they-
we have Holly Village Fire.
Sure, but they pay into NACFA and then we get mutual aid from NACFA.
Correct, we could get mutual aid from everybody because
Which
of
we
the
do.
mutual aid funds, which is also why we send mutual aid to them. But it isn't a very different thing than what we do, so.
So I think it is important with, you know, when we're marketing everything and educating the public to have a balance between panic and minimizing, because we do have, you know, the famous bicycle thief gangs. But we've also had big busts by Jerry's department with some larger organized rings in town as well. So we would become a target for different kinds of rings if it was highly publicized that we lost our local police and we had to go through state because we simply can't afford county. And state does have a response time of 25 to 30 minutes instead of our 3 to 6,
I
whatever.
mean, how many townships and?
Well, and the thing with ordinance too, like I stated at our last meeting, is if we don't have ordinance, Mr. Love's going to wreak hell at in town, talk about tacky town then. This is when you end up with pink flamingos and toilets on the side of every yard. And I mean, I don't think that our community is as bad as, that, obviously. They're not just gonna start throwing toilets on the side of the road, but, some people would. Some people don't care about the, exterior of their homes, right? And there's gonna be no one to maintain that. And then why would any businesses wanna be in our town without police response time and with that kind of tacky look, which means we lose revenue?
I also have a question with the charter, does our charter state that we are providing police and fire services?
It says we can.
We can, okay. I was worried about the language, like what are we legally as a council obligated to give based on charter stuff? So that is something I wanna relook at.
In
as
our
just on a
bylaws.
basis.
To go back to Dan's, Councilmember Daniel's, question about how much we should charge more than, we'll find out more once we have the capital improvement plan.
Well, I'm not, I mean,
And
like
then
I'm
we'll know how
saying,
much we actually
I'm not
save
saying
for
let's,
all that.
millions of dollars, I'm
Right.
just saying, you know, it's like, if we need $700,000, let's say, should we budget it for 750 just in case there's mix up in the numbers somewhere, or, so we know we're covering ourselves. So we're not walking into the next year with, oh,
Right, and
well,
that's
we
what
didn't
the
take care of
capital
it, but
improvement
now
plan
we
would
got
tell
it.
us.
But that's not really part of the special assessment portion.
Right,
that's
that would be
part
the
of-
Headley.
Yeah, that'd be,
override.
if we do the override, we actually can start, like, saving money for.
Well, I'm not talking about, I'm just saying like, everybody's human, people can enter zeros where they don't belong or commas where they don't belong, and we realize, oops, we missed, the numbers didn't go, and there's $25,000 that we kind of switched it, and we missed a zero, we thought it was 2,500, but it's 25,000. Now we're back at a deficit, even though it's a very small deficit, it's something that I wouldn't want to.
So this is what the surveys and the team would bring to us, is recommendations built on public input and our experts' advice.
Okay.
But thank you for helping us clarify that. Did you have any other options up there for us to consider, Tim?
Just as, our big things are just the revenue as far as, real property, because that's where most of our, things come from. There's a lot of other things that, we can look into and talk about as far as, like I said, we can leverage up to 1 mil for cemetery. There's other things like that, but like, these have been, again, we've only been on the job for 90 days and just trying to reconcile the budget, figure out where we're at, and we haven't gotten, into the weeds on all of those specific, smaller things too.
For the viewers that are watching live that have not yet viewed last week's meeting, can we have a summary on how this deficit got to be where it is, please?
Yes, so, again, it was, in fact, I can probably pull up the old slides.
That water again.
And I think that one of the things, as we are, talking about this, looking into it, we should also, another thing I'm gonna try to bring forward, is a fund balance policy, as well as a water and sewer reserve policy, as far as like, to prevent some of these items from happening. So, let me do this.
Well, and I think too, for people watching at home who maybe haven't watched last week's budget, is the difference between what townships, villages, and cities pay
Yeah.
for tax revenue, like what we get back
What we get.
versus the 1%, 1.8, and 3% from state.
Yes. So, and I'll go over this real quick. Again, just a recap of what we talked about. So, if you look, we can see that, this is just the general fund balance. Again, we're only talking about Fund 101 when we're going over this, this information. And we can see, our general trends. Again, this ended in 2024, the last time this data was there. This is all publicly available information. If we actually were to chart where we're at right here, we'd probably be like down here for a lot further. The reason that we see an increase right here is based on, this is during COVID time frame, and so we got federal funding that was able to offset some of this. Councilmember Ryan pointed out that this is the year right here that we sold our previous building, which allowed us to have some additional finances here that brought us up to. So where does our funding come from? All right, so I already talked a little bit about, what happened with our millage rates, that it was due to Headley rollback, it reduced how much we earned. So almost half of the money that we have for our general fund comes from real property tax. So we get no money from income tax, most of our funding comes from real property tax. And so what that is your home's property value is essentially, when it's assessed, so when it's sold, it gets assessed. Essentially, half of that value is your taxable value of your home. And from that is where, like, all of our taxable value throughout the community is where, like, we pull our millage rate from, as far as, like, how much we get back in our mills. In future slides, I'll kind of cover that. We get, some from, also from state revenue sharing and some grants. State revenue sharing essentially is the 6% sales tax in Michigan. 15% of it, or I'm sorry, 4% is divided into local communities, and of that, like 15% gets sent back to local communities for state revenue sharing amounts. And that actually has been reduced in the recent years because the state, in order to balance their budget, they've been removing some of this money that is supposed to go to local municipalities, and they've been balancing their budget with the money that would have previously gone to us. So where we might have got 1.2 million in the past, now we're getting like 600,000 of how much. And again, our revenues have gone down across the board, while inflation and expenses have continued to go up. And so very little of this things we control. We have our SRO money we get from the schools, SROs, license permits. We're working on improving all of these things. But again, the big money maker for us as far as how we operate is in real property and state revenue sharing. Again, it's 15% of it, 4% of that 15% goes to local municipalities. And how this number is determined is based on 3 factors. One is our population, our yield equalization. So are we a township, a village, or a city? Getting priority in that order, and our taxable value of how much we have. And so that's, and I can pull up where this math comes from, some of that. So if let's see. I believe I can. All right. So, and this is a kind of new math that came out in this last year as far as how this is divided. So the 3 factors: taxable value, population, yield equalization payments. So within here, as you can see, having a population of 6,000 approximately, we would get the weight factors. If we were a township, it's a 1.2, a village, 1.8 we're at. If we're a city, we would get a 3 factor. So being a village rather than a city reduces how much we get from that state revenue share as well. And essentially why they do that, or at least my understanding of it, is because they assume if you're a city, you are operating in a certain manner, you have certain services that you're supposed to provide. Police, fire, the things that we provide, but as a village. So we are acting as a city, but being a village. So they don't think that, we would need as much of this state revenue share. And so that's, again, one of the considerations when we're going into looking at cityhood, why we might want to do that, because we would get more funding from that. Let's go back into this. And I'll try to clean this up to a more, easier to read, condensed version for the public. So how real property taxes are calculated. So it's our taxable value divided by 1,000 equals 1 mil. And you can do that at home if you're looking at your assessed data on your house. You can look at your taxable value and just divide it by 1,000. And that would be whatever 1 mil is for you would be what a millage would be for you. So if ours is 11.3, you would just take whatever your taxable value is, divided by 1,000, times it by 11.3. So,
But that would just be for village tax, that wouldn't include any township taxes, right?
this is just for village that we're talking here. So township has a completely separate tax. Item. So for our assessed value for our village at the time, I think this was actually, I think our assessed value is a little higher than this, and for 2025, this is for 2024. I think it's like 173 million, 174 million. But for every 1 mil we get, it would be $164,000 that would come back to us in real property story, because, well, Milford has a higher taxable value, even though they're roughly the same population as us. So where were at this time, 154 million, they were at 376 million. So every mill for them would be 376,000, would be 154,000 for us, where they would be taking in total for their millage almost 3 million. We're at 1.778. Also keep in mind, for like Milford, their police and fire is run through a millage that is at the township level. So this money right here is just for their base operating, not for their police and fire, which are our two biggest expenses.
And they also have a road millage for capital improvement projects.
And these are kind of, these are also, just to be fair on it too, when I'm breaking down these, I'm not showing library millage and all this. I'm just going general operating, so this data is kind of hard to come by, and it'd be almost impossible for me to show a complete breakdown of all of Oakland County or the surrounding area, because every place does it differently. Some do it just as one operating fund, others break it down into specific categories for each thing they do. So we talked about township. So the township, well, their taxable value is $441 million. And so even though their operating millage is 2.7454, again, it's 1 mil for their operating that they have, and then it has parks and it has library in there, but they will be pulling in 1.2 million from that, not having DPW, not having fire, not having police. And then in addition to that, they do a 4 mil special assessment for NACFA, which is another 1.2, or 1.149 on that last one, and that is assessed only against township residents, not village residents, which is still more expensive than it takes us to run our normal fire department. So, like, even if we were to contract through NACFA, it potentially would be more expensive than how we're currently operating. And so I went through every, all municipalities I could within Oakland County to provide comparable data to kind of show, we are probably the lowest, for the services we provide, we are the lowest, bring in the lowest operating expenses for our general fund.
And we're currently at what, 11.6 mil?
No, this last year was 11.5166, but the new one is 11.3. I don't remember exactly.
And now it's gonna be 11.5, I think is what it is.
I believe it. We were at 11.5166, and I know that this next one, the 4029 that you put out, was 11.3 something with the rollbacks. Yeah. So while we're looking into that exact rate, so we will essentially be again collecting less mills this next time, but because our taxable value increased, when I did the quick math of it, I think we were just pulling in 70,000 less because of the difference between our taxable value and our taxable value going up while our millage went down.
So you have a proposed plan for the continuity of this knowledge for future councils and staff, because you were talking about a fund balance policy that could be enacted. So this can't happen again, because the way we got here is that the previous councils and staff never recommended rolling back overriding the Headley Amendment rollback. And they should have many years ago.
Yeah.
And that's why we're in a deficit now. That completes the summary. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's it, April.
Yeah.
That's it.
So, yeah, again, we're not deciding anything right now. This is more to just get a general pulse of the council, and any discussions come out, so that we know as the advisors which way, when we go forward, do we want to start doing a public hearing, or creating a special assessment district for this? Do we want to, which route we want to go? And I think just having individual conversations, I kind of know general marching orders for us going
don't do anything.
If we don't do anything, again, like, we can't continue to operate in a deficit like we've been doing. And again, the state-
1 year, we're done.
I'd ask the money person.
I don't know, but again, like you're saying, we won't do anything, we'd have to do something. We'd have to cut services, we'd have to cut staff.
Yeah.
That there
Services
would
and
be
staff would be
something
the
done.
first to be
It's
done.
just that it's gonna be at those levels.
Yeah, and it really, I guess that is what it comes down to. It's, our other option is that if we don't increase revenue, is we have to remove services. And
So we
that-
start losing services until we lose the whole village if we don't do anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, on that note,
So on that note,
Heavy thinking.
That's why,
Well-
it's education, it's about educating the public
Well, how long
about this.
before this, if we didn't do anything, how long before the state of Michigan would probably step in?
I don't know.
It just depends on how drastic the cuts got, so that you stay afloat, or we stay afloat. So, I mean, then once you get to a certain level of services, they're gonna say, you know, you're gonna get pushback from the public on it, so.
And I don't know, the question about what statute, like statutorily, what we are supposed to provide as far as police and fire, I know it said we may, but I want to verify all that because I have not actually like looked through the charter yet to determine exactly what it says about that for us right now.
But even if we did get rid of those, that would decrease property values, which means less money coming in as well.
I think the charter does state we're supposed to provide an adequate police and fire.
Yeah, and I can pull up that and I'll have all the information.
I
for
think,
it.
don't quote me, I'm not positive.
We got it. Quoted.
well, thank you all for your last two Saturday mornings, taking all of this in, and this meeting is adjourned.